Well, hello, everybody. How's it going today? Happy New Year, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington. Hey, the local time is 1:47, and we will begin our program at the top of the hour. That's about 13 minutes from now. Our guest is an old friend of ours, Basil Tikoff, Session M, in an alphabet series running from A to Z. It's been a couple of weeks since we've done one of these. Well, let's see if we can't get back in the flow. I'm talking to myself. I see a bunch of 5x5s. I don't have to ask for that. Thank you very much. And let's say hi to a few of you. And where are you viewing from this afternoon, this evening, tomorrow morning, this morning, and so on? Hello, Michael and family from Trim, Ireland. Hello, James. Happy New Year to you as well. Womack, Washington. Prosser, Washington. Jefferson City, Missouri. Menominee, Marinette. Slowing the chat down now a little bit. Australia, British Columbia, Lake Ozark, Minnesota. Whoa, Lake Ozark, Missouri, excuse me. Godoften from Denmark. Lots of Happy New Year's to everybody. That's nice to see. Jeff is in Chiclayo, Peru. Mankato, Minnesota. I'm scrolling back. Why not? I can do that. Breaking the chat out like a boss, popping the chat out like a boss. Whoa, come on. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Dallas, Texas. Webb Lake, Wisconsin. Como, Colorado. Marysville, Washington. Kamloops, BC. Now I'm down to live. Garrett, the Deutschnado from the Netherlands. Hello, Garrett. Jackson, Louisiana. The Shuswap, BC. That's the BC buddy. Hello. Miamisburg, Ohio. South Central Michigan. Houston, Texas. That's Celeste. Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Dan is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Stephen's in Eugene, Oregon. Crown House from Vienna, Austria. Santa Clarita, California. Polson, Montana. Ripon College, Wisconsin. Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Rick is in Costa Rica. Kirk is in Willamette. Here's to you, Kirk. I made these beautiful mugs. Sharon is in snowy Malaga Slide. Oh, it's snowy over there in Wenatchee, huh? I mean, it's coming down right now. And we're going to get a couple inches here in Ellensburg tonight. Plenty of snow and ice around here. Let me email the gift before I forget. I just visited with Basil an hour ago. We were practicing with some slides. Gmail, Basil, link, send. William O. Smith. Betty's in Puyallup, Washington. Saber, you still in Baja, Mexico, Saber? That's nice to see. I'm guessing you're still down there. Bunny, Oregon. Hello, Will. Albany, Oregon, to be precise. Now the audio is struggling. Is that true? Can I pause for just a second? Is the audio struggling on your end, or are we 5x5? Could I get a little technology check from you all, please? Audio is struggling, or audio is good? Is audio good? Cutting out a bit, breaking up a bit. Okay? What's that about? I plugged back in. Let me try again, and if not, I've got a backup that I can try. Yeah, it looks like we're, so let me, are we 5x5 right now with a reconnected microphone? Otherwise, I'll go to another one. I'm going to wait just a couple minutes. Now it's way too hot. Audio is much better now. I am going to, that's part of the reason we start a little bit early. I'm seeing a bunch of, still a little choppy. Still bad. You guys are all over the place. Okay, let me try a different microphone. Okay, this is microphone number 2. Can I? Basil, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, the fun continues here. Let's I have a dead monitor at the moment, so this is interesting. Okay. It looks like we're still up and running. I'm going to have to improvise. I don't know why this monitor is dead, but let's okay, we have 513 watching at the moment. That's beautiful. Um, and the sound is okay. If I see 3 more sounds are okay, then I'm just going to stop that. I've already restarted OBS. I'm not going to do it again. Now, okay, I just have to stop thinking about that. So thank you. I'm down to 1 monitor, but I have the live chat rolling by. I see Basil's in the green room, and his shared screen is in the green room, Basil. So we're good there too. And I got 2 thumbs up from Basil live in the green room. So that's wonderful. Wow, what a way to start. All right, let me close this a little bit. Wow, there's probably going to be some unforeseen issues here. What might those be? I'm going to just go over here real temp fate. Yep. All right, and I gotta come a little tighter with that. We're probably going to start a couple minutes late, everybody. Whoo, doggy. Sound is still choppy a little bit. I don't understand. I don't. Hi, Jane. Jane, it's nice to see you in the green room there. Yeah, the sound reports are all over the place. I am going to wait another couple of minutes. We're not going to get started right at the top of the hour. I've got a couple other things I want to say before we get rolling, but good enough. Sound is 5x5. Ivana says maybe a loose connection, but sound is good. Sound not choppy, 5x5. Audio is tolerable. What would be the issue here? It'd be nice to. Okay. I do need to make one announcement very quickly before we begin. And that, against my better judgment, I'm going to be live streaming again this Friday from this classroom. And those are the Talk Friday sessions that we've had. And we're resuming that this coming Friday. So if I can share this with you real quickly, you are welcome to come back. And there'll be a link for this on my YouTube channel Friday at noon Pacific. And our speaker will be Hannah Shamloo, who's a superstar new professor. I'm sure that you will enjoy this talk. And that's Hannah. Diffusion in magma and crystals, tracking the timing of eruption initiation. That's this coming Friday at noon Pacific. And I'll be announcing again as we go along that there will be 5 of these geology seminar talks in the room. Maybe you saw some of those last fall. So it'll be a different format. It'll be Hannah giving the talk and talking to the geologists who are invited to join us for that Talk Friday session. I'm going to look for 3 more audio comments. I guess there's nothing I can do about it anyway, but sound is deteriorating. Choppy audio. I'm going back to the original microphone, and then I just have to stop thinking about it. The fates are tempting me. I mean, if we're looking for a silver lining, I don't completely fall apart like I used to a couple of years ago when there was an audio problem or a technology problem, but I'm getting close. So can I ask one last time, and then we're going to begin our program just a handful of minutes after the top of the hour. Are we 5x5 with this microphone? And I'll look for a majority of the comments saying yes. Great, that's enough for me. Please give me 2 minutes to get my head right, and we will be beginning our session M here on Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Oh boy. Okay, everybody's here. They want you to succeed. They love Basil. Get to Basil soon as you can. You have some things on the chalkboard. You do have some laptop things. You can't think about the technology stuff. You just can't. You got to, all your attention needs to go on the geology content, and you can do this. This is not your first time doing this. Start with the lineup, start with the January lineup. Mention the models quickly. Go to the map. Keep it brisk on the chalkboards. Lay out a bunch of potential ideas for Basil to talk about. You can do this, even with that start. You can do this. You know what you're doing now. You can do it. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Happy New Year. It's 2023, and here we are together again. It's been 2 weeks off. Apparently, the technology here has been rusting and gathering dust in the classroom, so we'll have to kind of get everything back up and running once again, and I'm talking about myself as well. For the rest of the alphabet, we will be back to our normal schedule. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. 8 shows in January and 6 shows in February. So that will get us to February 18th, which will be our last show. Am I really flying by the seat of my pants and not knowing who is even coming on next show? Sometimes that has been the case in past alphabet series. But in this case, I have everybody lined up for January. I don't know about February, but January. And there's a reason I want to share that lineup with you right now. He goes to it. Today's guest is an old friend. His name is Basil Tikoff. Wednesday, January 4th. But we've got 2 shows with paleomagnetist Bernie Housen at Western Washington University this coming Saturday and the following Wednesday. Jane Wynn, paleomagnetic expert who studied with Ed Irving, we're just playing with it. Randy Enkin, paleomagnetic activity. So we have basically Bernie, Jane, and Randy, 4 main courses of paleomag as promised. And therefore, today we're not going to do a whole lot of paleomag. I know that I was kind of building us up for January being a paleomagnetic feast. But I want to use Basil here today as a bridge and also to really celebrate this exotic, beautiful monster of a new paper called Hit and Run. Once we get done with those guys, then we're on to Karin Siglock and Mitch Mahalanek, who's a recent arrival addition to that show, Stephen Johnston, and a couple of Bob Hildebrand shows in late February and late January and early February. Okay, so that's different. Have the whole month lined up, and I kind of know where we're headed in a real cartoonish way. However, there's a bunch of details I don't know yet, and I won't know as I read their papers, and I won't really get until I start visiting with those experts live with you. And that, again, reminding you, is a hallmark of what we're trying to do here. We are learning together. It's not an act. It's not like I know all this stuff and I'm playing dumb. I am dumb about a bunch of this stuff. To wit, this is Mappy McMap. Back in 2020, I was coloring this map and going terrain by terrain, picking colors with the audience. This is back in the lockdown in my backyard. And the 2 blue guys, the navy blue and the lighter blue, are part of the Intermontane superterrain. And the Grello, the Cache Creek terrain, the Williams Lake. And then you can see how complicated Northern Washington. So I was working my way 2 years ago into this story, and my whole gimmick 2 years ago in my backyard was I had tried learning about these exotic terrains in north central Washington near my home, and each time I would try, I would essentially give up. It was too complicated. It's not until I decided to leave northern Washington and get up into British Columbia where I could start to see some basic relationships. I still have trouble knowing exactly what's going on in the North Cascades. And I think we'll see that again this month. But my first major point of today is I think I'm going to go east. I think I'm going to go east mentally, and I think I'm going to go east in general with these exotic terrains in this concept of Baja BC. I thought when I started this with session A that, I don't know, be about half North Cascades geology and about half would be elsewhere. I'm now realizing that maybe the last two letters are our only North Cascades. I think we need to be east of northern Washington to really understand the data that is organized with these four major models. So these two models, flat slab subduction to build the Rocky Mountain using California geology, devised by Bill Dickinson back in the 1970s, flat slab or shallow slab subduction. That will come up again today. And this isn't our first time with Basil Tikoff. 3 shows last winter and 1 show back right before Thanksgiving. Basil was talking about how if you are loving, even today, the flat slab subduction model to build the Rocky Mountains, then you're just not interested in this Baja BC thing. You just have to, if you're willing to consider Baja BC, you essentially need to toss out, or at least back away from in a major way, the flat slab subduction story. So when Basil and Julie Maxon first proposed this hit and run model back in the 1990s, in Basil's words, right before Thanksgiving this year, he said it just didn't gain much traction because the majority opinion continues. It continues to this day with flat slab subduction. Well, we're going to look more carefully at this hit and run model by not only Basil Tikoff, but Bernie Hausen, our guest on Saturday and a week from today. There are also tectonic models that have come out in the last 20 years. And Basil writes about this in his new paper. A ribbon continent concept proposed by Stephen Johnston, Bob Hildebrand, different papers more than 10 years ago. And then in the preceding decade, the 2010s, the discovery of these major slabs of subducted oceanic material in the lower mantle, slab walls, by Karin Siglock and Mitch Mulholland. Well, we have all these folks invited and scheduled to appear with us, and we will just learn as we go with these experts. Okay, pick it up. That puts hit and run in context. Let me try now to kind of give us some visuals, basically trying to take some stuff from the last couple of months of alphabet work with you all, and then I'm basically trying to talk to Basil as well as we spitball potential ideas as we discuss together. Okay, the idea is that before we bring any of these exotic terrains in, before we have the hit and run, before we have some of these other models, these tectonic models, we have an old West Coast here with old North America, the Craton of North America, Laurentia, it's sometimes called. And did that margin look like this? No, that's one of Basil's points, that this is a jagged coastline, not a straight one. But I'm just trying to cartoonishly show it as basic as possible. Our idea of the insular superterrane, or I might start calling it the insular microcontinent, to use a phrase from 50 years ago, which we called a whale. The idea is that whale is major in size, that whale, the insular superterrane or the insular microcontinent, hits Western North America, not out here. We don't have that land yet. We hit it here, and we not only deform old North America, we deform the whale itself. So we have folds, we have thrust faults, we have plutons, we have deformation and pluton invasion. Remember that from last winter? Not only inland, but within the Hittite. It helped us last winter And I kept saying, I want to look for all these fireworks. You remember the mid-Cretaceous fireworks? I want to look for all this deformation inland. And Basil last winter kind of said, yeah, you got some fireworks here, but you've got it within the thing that's hitting as well. The main concept today, the hit and run model, says this. Our insular superterrane hits North America like symbols. You remember the beginning of our series? Instead of an accordion view, we want a symbols approach. We want the insular superterrane to approach from the lower left. And we want this whale to not hit head on and make the Rocky Mountains, but we want this whale to approach North America obliquely. We want to compress it and do strike slip motion at the same time. To me, that's the main concept of today. Transpression. That's combining two words. Transform activity, strike slip motion, combined with compression, transpression. Transform activity and compression simultaneously. And Basil has all sorts of evidence up and down the western margin of old North America and within the insular superterrane, within the whale, between 100 and 85 million years ago. That's the hit of the hit and run model. We're coming on that. Starting 85 million years ago, we begin this major northward movement north. Northward movement north. I'm still trying to relax here. And if you're a 1 on the scale or a 10 on the scale, you have varying amounts of belief, acceptance that there's northward migration. You remember this from before Christmas. Well, Basil's point is that here at the Western Idaho Shear Zone, where Basil has spent 25 years working, we have the whale hitting and transpressing. All groups have to agree that we have a hit here in Idaho. What does that look like on this map? That means if you are lower than a 4 on the 1 to 10 scale, you want the insular superterrane hitting north of California. And basically, it's the southern part, it's the tail of the whale that's hitting Idaho. And then, yeah, there's less than 1,000 kilometers of northward swimming of the whale. But if you're over a 7 on the 1 to 10 scale, and you embrace the paleomagnetic data, you also agree that the insular superterrane struck Idaho 100 million years ago during the hit and run phase. But it was the northern, it was the head of the whale, not the tail. It was the head that hit Idaho. And then this entire whale swims north. And by the time we get to the tail of the whale, did you catch it? The tail of the whale is the Mount Stewart Pluton, the Mount Stewart batholith just north of my town. That thing is up in northern Washington now, north of my town, right over there. But of course, if you're a 10 on the scale, you want Mount Stewart Pluton down in Mexico. So that's why one of the main reasons Basil went to Idaho, because everybody agreed that Idaho received some collisional activity. And we're going to look at what that carefully looks like as we talk to Basil. A couple of other things with chalkboard. We'll go to the laptop, and then we're off and talking with Basil. My opening comment about looking east is something that hopefully looks semi-familiar to you from before Christmas. Insular, this is the whale. Insular, this has the Mount Stewart graniton. I guess I didn't realize it until the last month. I've been focusing on the North Cascades, and I'm still viewing that as the whale, as the insular superterrane, as the insular microcontinent. I'm not really thinking about a major Baja BC fault anymore coming down the guts of the North Cascades. Again, somebody might talk me out of that as we go along this winter, but you know that we were doing this. Is this a major fault just to the east of the whale? Or if you look at Darrell Cowan's maps from the mid-1990s, he has a major strike slip fault going right down through the middle of the intermontane superterrane. Basil came over here to the Wiz, was looking for the Baja BC fault there. Bob Hildebrand and a few others possibly want that major translation on a fault happening in Old North America. I made that point more than once before Christmas. But I think the biggest thing that I have to ask Basil and to talk to Basil about, I still don't know what's going on with the intermontane. Like just the way I presented this right now. The whale is hitting North America and making the Rocky Mountains and then moving north. And it's like the whale is not only hitting and going north with the hit and run model, but I think what Basil's saying is the whale is hitting North America and then the whale is like leaning its right shoulder into North America as it goes north. It's not swimming gracefully up the coast. It's like, what is that? Transpression. And then we just keep compressing as we're moving north. So I don't know what to do with the intermontane is my point. Even with that simple map that's on the back of this, here's the Wiz with all this deformation from the hit. But the intermontane was parked there. And that is brought out in Basil's paper. Basil, I'm just still giving you ideas we might want to get into a little bit. I think Basil says, well, these major faults are a place where we have lots of Pluton activity anyway. They're soft spots, essentially. So Basil's model says that we hit with the whale 100 million years ago, and most of the deformation is here, even though this is where the hit is really happening. Or we just can't get a good look at that true boundary between the insular and the intermontanes that's underneath all the German chocolate cake. One more thing with the chalkboards. Feels like I'm going long. I guess I am. Oh, the battery's dying on my wristwatch as well. This is an all-timer. This is an all-timer. Yeah. I had a great time over the break reading Basil and Bernie's paper multiple times. Thoroughly enjoyed it, in part because we had such, the pump was primed with the Basil visits from the last couple of winters. So it's like I wasn't starting cold with that stuff. It was easier reading for me typically because all those ideas were already kind of laid out for us. So if you haven't had a chance to look yet at the paper, I think you will really enjoy it and will understand quite a bit of it. The concept here is that since that flat slab subduction model was proposed 50 years ago-ish, 45 years ago, there's all sorts of new data sets that need to be respected and looked at and honored and possibly incorporated. Yes, this is Basil. Basically, our next 4 shows will be looking carefully at a consistent paleomagnetic signature from the last 50 years. Nobody backing off of that work, even today. You've already heard that. The Nanaimo guy from Calgary talking about detrital zircons. It's not just those guys, but those are the guys that got me started thinking about looking east, because remember, the source of those detrital zircons apparently was swimming north with the Nanaimo. Basil might help us more with the idea that we have a major plate reorganization 100 million years ago. And are we really sinking our teeth into the idea that we have everything moving south offshore before 100 million years ago and then moving back north younger than 100 million years ago? Basil makes a big point about using work understanding that the blue line making the old coastline of the old North American continent is not a simple line. It's a very jagged line, and we get into a concept called Idaho catch and release, which I loved. I chuckled out loud when I got to that part of the paper. That'll come. And then, yeah, we have these subducted slabs that we didn't know about 20 years ago, let alone 40, 50 years ago. How can we use those old slabs in the lower mantle to help us put this together? Final thing with the chalkboard. from our earlier shows in this winter's alphabet series, I have become more and more interested in the number 85. Technically, the Calgary guys had 84. But that's when I really started locking into this concept, because remember, the Nanaimo group, we had 4 shows before Christmas on the Nanaimo sediments in southern BC. And what did we say? The floor dropped. The floor started to drop about 85 million years ago. We get deep water. We have submarine fans. And the old PCers, those old detrital zircons, start coming in from the east and dumping into those submarine fan seams. What's going 85 million years ago to explain that? Well, it's not just that. Basil's going to take us again today, probably, to the western Idaho shear zone, the northwest Nevada shear zone, the shear zone going through the Sierra Nevada batholith, which he first discovered 30 years ago. They all have transpression. They all have this strike slip motion at the same time that we have the protons coming up, the marshmallow coming up through the symbols that are trying to go sideways. But everything shuts down, as I understand it, 85 million years ago. So what can we say regionally about 85 million years ago? By the way, what's starting 85 million years ago? Baja BC. Okay, we go to the laptop for 5 minutes, and then we go to you, Basil. Oh, there's weather. Good. Discombobulated. If we go to nickzentner.com, it looks like this. If we click on Baja on the upper right, it looks like this. And post it again for you. At the very top of our list is this monster of a paper. Hit and run model for Cretaceous Paleogene tectonism along the western margin of Laurentia. And I say Basil, but there's a number of co-authors here. I would like, if possible, to get into some of these details, but of course, there's way too much to cover in just a half an hour discussion with Basil. But I have a list of questions, Basil. I got a list of questions. And here's the Paleo Mag that we will kind of separate out and talk about next week with Bernie Hauser. So is that all I wanted to do with the laptop? No. I want to try this really quickly. So North America is breaking away from Pangea, and it's heading northwest. And North America is quite a ways north before it starts cruising southwest. And this is a theme that perhaps will be a dead end, but just looking carefully at these global animations, I think I'm interested in the location, the true latitude and longitude of North America at these times. And if North America is actually starting to drift southwest during Baja BC time, if that's right, does that make things better or worse for our problematic high speeds of ocean plate motion up the coast? This may or may not come up. This is one of the classic images from the new paper. And yeah, it really isn't technically out. 2023, the hit and run paper. You're getting a sneak peek. But here I am really, eating my Wheaties here and really looking like, look at this boundary. What does this mean? Is this important, Basil? Here's the 49th parallel today, the boundary between Washington and Canada. It's higher than 50 degrees north. I'm sorry, this is during the hit phase and this is during the run phase. So 100 to 85 million years ago, our international boundary is almost up to 60 degrees north. But North America apparently is heading, the continent of North America is apparently heading south-ish. Am I reading this incorrectly? Or does this have any bearing on our discussion today? Skip it. What we're really saying then is that the insular superterrane, the whale, is not only swimming north, but it's also acting as a collider and creating massive amounts of deformation inland of the collision. In case that hasn't struck you yet, no pun intended, That's the concept. So like, this is a Tanya Atwater animation on a loop. This is the approach of the insular supercontinent. It hits North America 100 million years ago, and then the only thing we'd have to change is start sending this thing north and still doing this depression, still doing this compression to build the Rockies. Basil, I've got another question. Are the Canadian Rockies younger than the U.S. Rockies? Is there any Canadian Rocky development during the initial hit 100 million years ago? I'm not sure you say that in your paper. And if not, are we really forming all the northern Canadian Rockies, the Canadian Rockies in Alberta and British Columbia? Are we doing all that during the whale's journey north? Yeah. Right. I think Basil's got some of this again. There's what got me going on the whale concept. We'll talk more about that potentially, and the fact that there's actually eastward subduction underneath a moving whale. I showed these 2 months ago, so I'm going to skip past. I don't know what to do still with the intermontane. I would love to learn some new things about why I should care about the intermontane superterrain. I'd like to also understand more, Basil, about this Idaho catching release. I get the concept that we get this portion of the exotic terrain stuff that hit 100 million years ago, we get it stuck in this armpit, and then we start to rotate on the Lewis and Clark line. But when do we finally release? Seems like we have to rotate and then release like quickly. Is that true? What am I missing with the hit and the run? You're like, it's in black and white. It's right in the paper. All you have to do is read it. Well, I reread it about 4 times. I still don't think I totally get it. And then a tip of the hat to later on this month, talking about the polarity of subducting slabs. We'll probably table this for today's discussion, but how significantly do we want westward subduction at certain points, eastward subduction at certain points, when we're thinking about the intermontane and the insular terrains coming in? Okay, look at that now. Come on. Maybe after we're done talking to Basil, we'll come back to some of this and try to keep a little bit more of this out. But I need to get going. You've been waiting long enough. Let me get my headphones, Basil. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Oh, now we have a problem. Hang on. Hang on. Why do I hear my... I'm thrown yet again, but let's try to bring Basil in. If I get to the right camera. Okay. I can hear myself, and I don't want to hear myself. This is not going to be another Aaron Donaghy show, damn it. Where's the volume? I think I just did it. Okay. Coming to you, Basil. Let's give this a try. Basil Tikoff, how are you today?
I'm well, Nick. Thank you. And yourself?
Okay. Give it another try. I think I've just got it now, Basil.
Okay.
How are you today? Good.
I'm fine.
Good.
It's all good?
Wow. I have looping audio in my headphones. I would like, Basil, you to how quickly can the guy think? How quickly can the guy think? That's the question. So I assume you can still hear me, Basil. I
I can
cannot at the
indeed.
moment because I don't have my headphones on, but I have the echo thing going. Maybe I can turn on the audio on my iPad. And I want to bring you in and just have you chat just a little bit. This is still not going to work great, but let's try this. Let's try this. Are you hearing the same echoing? God damn it!
Yes.
Sorry, everybody. God damn it! Sorry, everybody. Basil, I'm going to get myself out. I'm going to share your screen. And can you talk to our folks at home for just a little bit and see if I can figure this out on my own?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that, Nick.
Talk basically.
Sure.
I'll see if I can figure this out.
So
Okay,
if it's
I'm gonna wait for
possible,
just a
maybe
sec.
could you take the echoing part? Oh, there you go. It's out. Well, hello, everybody. This is sort of like going back to Zoom teaching. So I'm sorry I can't be more interactive, but I had some slides ready to go. And so this is probably like the perfect time to bring them up. So the 2023 paper that we wrote was based on a bunch of prior work because, right, all scientific work is based on what happened before then. This was an earlier paper, most approximately that Julie Maxson and I put together for how the insular terrain collision might have hit further south and then moved north and cut off the magnetism, explaining the same basic data that the shallow slab was. And this, in turn, was based on two different things. One was that John Oldau and Hans Ivey Lamont talked about terrains and how they translated. So that idea, although it didn't catch on, it was sort of out there in the literature. And I think they made a compelling case for something like that happening. In addition, though, it's really based on the careers of many people who were doing paleomagnetic analysis. Merle Beck among them, prominently among them, as well as Ted Irving, prominently among them. Nick, I see you're back. All right, I'm going to keep going until Nick interrupts, which
Well, I'm almost afraid to speak. Can you hear me?
I can.
I think I'm still in an echo, but if I might be able to figure this out. So keep rolling, please. I'm enjoying this as much as I can hear it.
Okay, so Bernie Hausen will talk a lot about the paleomagnetic data. The paleomagnetic data from the Canadian Cordillera is excellent. They're really well done studies. And so what you see here in yellow is where the insular terrain hits and where the insular terrain is in terms of paleo latitude. And then the blues are where the intermontane is. And the A is at about 100 and then B is about 70 in sort of round numbers. And although they're saying that those areas are really displaced, places like the Sierra Nevada batholith in California have not moved. And I want to be clear, that's at exactly the same time, using exactly the same technique that says, basically they might have moved 100, 200, even 300 kilometers north. But it turns out that's all recent. That's all sort of after about 18 million years. So the technique works. There is zero reason to disagree with that. The only problem is, and this came out in the 1999 Penrose, is geologists were really unwilling to sort of give up models to adopt a different kind of data. But the data, in some sense, is more fundamental. And so at some point, you have to deal with the fact that it's really very coherent. The basic idea, I think I have a little bit of an echo. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for Nick. So here's the idea, is that I don't have an echo from the Nick side, which is great now. That there's a hit, and the insular terrain here is put back where it restores to from the paleomagnetic analysis, and the intermontane is put back as well. And so the idea is that the insular is going to hit and then move north, and then the run is both of these things moving north on a whole series of well-established strike slip faults that exist in the Canadian Cordillera. There are right lateral faults in the U.S. Cordillera that are this age as well, including in coastal California, but it's really hard to document the amount of offset on those faults because there's no piercing point. There's nothing that was once together on both sides of the fault has been offset because these are, by definition, boundaries. So that's the basic idea of why this happens.
Hey, there's a chance I solved it. Are we okay right now, Basil?
We are, Nick.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you to the viewer who typed in to mute my other screen with YouTube. You'd think I'd have that figured out by now. Holy God. Hang on just a second.
Nick, I think everybody's having a better time than you are right now. So I think you shouldn't worry about it. It's all good.
You're a good guy. You really are.
It's nice to talk about geology. It's like, you know, when I was lecturing during the pandemic, it was like talking to an empty box. It's just like, whatever.
Well, that was an empty box for sure. And it was, okay. Well, so I think we're up and running. I think we can still even go with slides, but you've already used a few right now. So let's just kind of,
let's go with questions, Nick. It's much more fun to interact with you.
Good. Thank you. Am I correct in hearing and reading that we're doing a hell of a lot of mountain building inland of a northward moving insular superterrain? Like the run, the deformation isn't over when the run is happening.
That's exactly right. So the hit is strange because it's not everywhere. It's localized in areas where if something moves north, the sticking outy parts of North America are going to get hit.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, Idaho gets hit, but so does Southern California. Because there's no two ways around this, that Southern California just sticks out. In fact, Southern California sticks out so far that it gets chopped off during left lateral motion much earlier in the history in the Pennsylvania Permian.
Okay.
But Idaho also, I think, stuck out. It's just the North American margin just comes out exactly. And so that's why you get these things that don't make sense. They're regional. They're big uplifts, but they're regional uplifts.
So that works for my brain for some intense uplift here or here because we're stuck and there's no place for this whale to swim north. But how about the Canadian Rockies?
Interesting. Yes. And so it only happens where it sticks out this way. The Canadian Rockies keep stepping in. So it's really easy to slide north. It's how the Precambrian broke. There's only two sticking out parts. One was northern Idaho and one is Southern California. Right. Everything else is happy to slide, is happy going north. Now going south, it turns out before Diane Clemens-Nada is thinking about what happens when you move these terrains south, and they're going to get stuck on some of those same outboard places, which probably in her work is what gives you the antler orogeny, which makes no sense otherwise because it's only in Northwest Nevada. It's like, what's it doing only there? And it's because that's where North America sticks out if you're moving things sinistrally. But if you turn it around and move dextrally, that place is fine. But it's the other places, California and Idaho, that are going to get hit.
Okay, two things from that. So one, you didn't really appreciate the jagged nature of the old Laurentian margin back in the mid 90s, I don't think, or did you even back then?
No, not at all.
So how have the discovery of those promontories helped your case? How about this, Basil? What are like a handful of things that you didn't have in that first hit and run paper that you now have where you feel like the case is even stronger?
That's a great question. So I'm going to start proximally. The thing that really drove me was that bend in Idaho, because I just fundamentally didn't understand it. The data was good, but I just could not get my brain wrapped around that you can take an entire huge block of North America and smash it into North America as a result of what's happening offshore. Mm-hmm. But it's really no different than what Merle Beck was talking about all these little BB rollers, except Idaho is a big BB. I mean, right? If that turns out to be true, it's kind of a big thing. So that's one major thing. The second major thing I can think of is Margie Russmore's 2013 paper, and you talked with Margie about this. That one kind of blew my mind because it was, right, we have these models, we have these simplifications, and there was this insular belt and this intermontane belt, and it all made sense, and the Canadians had this system, and Margie was saying, wait a minute, these suckers might not be coherent. You might be taking a little bits of this one and shuffling it with this one. So the terrains are shuffling themselves, right? And that makes perfectly good sense. There's a strikes of fault. And if it moves this way and then cuts obliquely, then you're going to have a bit that's intermontane plus insular and another block that's intermontane insular. And you can move one block around. So you could get sandwiches, which make no sense, right? So Margie's, that idea of just oh, it's not that simple, that there's something else. And then people just to go back to this, one last thing is Stacia Gordon, Danny Coots, Will Matthews, all that great new detrital zircon data that people are getting is really interesting. And we didn't have that before. And I think we thought that would solve all our problems. And I think from your show, you've seen it's kind of open to interpretation. But the data is awesome. And the tracers they're using are great. So we're going to find out a whole lot more about that, which is great. So I would say those are three big things.
I'm loving this when we finally get in a rhythm here. Thank you. So that did feel like a big moment from Margie's show, that she says, how about we change the paradigm and start using the paleomagnetic signatures to correlate between things as opposed to the complicated bedrock of each of these individual terrains. And that's exactly what you're doing with this paper. You write that from the start, essentially. So are you kind of taking Margie's lead with that idea, or vice versa, or both of you are kind of thinking that kind of going the detrital zircon route or some of these other bedrock interpretation routes is not getting us where we need to go? And so it's the paleomag?
It's a package deal, right?
Yeah.
So when I read Margie's paper, it's great. Basically all my friends showing up on your show to talk about these things, right? And I wrote Margie and I was like, this paper is awesome. Thank you for doing that. And she's like, well, I'm glad you understand it because I don't think I do. Or something like that. And it was like, yeah, I don't understand it. You have proved to me that I don't understand it, right? Which was huge. And so you're exactly right. We take that approach and just say, we're just going to use the paleomag to put the pieces back together to find out what's going on, right? And so it's one of these things where everything is adding data. But what's nice about the hit and run model is it doesn't rely on the paleomag in some sense. It's a geological model that basically just says, is this geologically permissive that you can actually have these things where you go? And as soon as we started doing that, things just fell in place. Oh, this has never made any sense to me. Why does the basin range extend from central Mexico all the way to sort of Idaho and then kind of stop? It's just well, that's exactly where the insular terrain collision was, right? It's just little things fall into place. It's oh, all of these arcs from Idaho, certainly through California, probably in New Mexico, although that is still open, are doing exactly the same thing, these transpressional dextral shear zones, at exactly the same time. It's like you turn a switch and all of that happens. And it's just like, oh, wait a minute, this is all making sense, right? And that's ultimately why scientists adopt new theories or hypotheses, is it's because they make predictions. They help you explain like observed phenomena, or or make predictions, or basically explain new data you're getting.
Mm-hmm. So towards the end of the paper, you're kind of stepping back and talking about models and data and how your model might not be the total answer. Like, do you want to comment on that further here? Like, people maybe after reading that paper go, finally, somebody figured it all out. The guy's got it. And yet we've got other models to be discussing before Groundhog's Day. So what's your view on models, data, and where the hit and run might stand in a grand scheme?
So I have to say, that's my favorite part of the paper, because in some ways, it was nice for someone to let you say, these are wrong. We know these are wrong, right? We stop progress when we assume something is right. But all models, there is no model that is right. If something as simple as Newtonian mechanics is wrong, and we know it is because there's all this relativity effect, but like it really makes a whole lot of sense, but it's wrong in detail. In geology, when we're dealing with a huge amount of uncertainty, of course it's wrong. But the reason I put that in is the data is always less uncertain than the models, right? Follow the data is basically what you need to do. Like in money, in politics, you follow the money. In science, you follow the data, right? Because the data is great. And the paleomagnetic data, the more you do it, the more consistent it is, right? It is impossible to get around that. I mean, you just have to ignore it. But what's crazy is the same people who ignore it in other papers, or even in the same papers, will use it to do like rotations. And it's just like, you can't have it both ways. It's either the data's bad or it's not. And the data, there's nothing wrong with the data, right? So the paleomag has really been critical in understanding all of this, which is why, several people have said that, it's really would be nice to do the paleomag. But I think it's fine, right, the way you did it, because it's a different data set, and it's all that it is. It's a different data set.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you saw the Brian Mahoney, Paul Link show, but towards the end of that, with those guys on camera, I was kind of like, they were so sure the paleomag was so separate from the bedrock geology. I was kind of like, well, maybe somebody would come up with a way to like bring those two worlds together. That's what you're doing with this paper. I mean, you were pretty clear about it right off the bat. So
absolutely.
I mean,
and the thing is, Karin Siglock's work on the mantle tomography, you've got to be consistent with that data too, right? So that there's all these types of data you have to deal with, and you have to make sure they all work with each other. But I want to go two different ways here. Different data has different qualities. If you want to look at latitudinal variation, there is only one way to do that, and that's paleomag. Anything else is second order compared to that. Paleomag does that, and it does rigid body rotations. Like, are you rotating big blocks of crust like that? It can do it better than anything else. And so you have to have a huge amount of data otherwise to argue against that. So likewise, if you want to say what a mantle slab is, paleomag's not your data set, right? That's basically seismic tomography, right? That's the only way you're going to be able to make sort of subduction zone type information. I mean, you can do inference from other data sources, but that's really the key data set. Structural geology is really great for telling you what little piece is moving what little amount when, right? For timing of things, that there you're in that's the technique. So the data sets have different values depending on what exactly you're getting at.
You're always so good. Come on, I want to keep going. Viewers, we're coming to you in a few minutes, and this is more disjointed than normal, obviously, but I hope you're still enjoying this. I actually have my little cheat sheet, which is rare for me, but I had a number of things. I knew I was going to have you on, and I was jotting down question after question. The insular did not hit the Western Idaho shear zone directly, correct? That intermontane, known as the Blue Mountains, that was for sure there as a little intermediate body. Is that right?
That is correct. So there is a zone of accretion of the Blue Mountain terrains, which is Wallowa and Olds Ferry and the Baker terrain between them. And that collision, again, this is where structural geology combined with geochronology is really good. That's definitely there. That collision is 140, 125, something in there.
Okay.
It might have extended a little later, might have started a little earlier, but it's definitely going on in that middle range. And it is up against North America because, again, the tridal zircons from North America are getting into and on top of some of those terrains. So you're pretty sure it's against North America somewhere. But because it's all west of the Western Idaho shear zone, and the Western Idaho shear zone, again, we don't know exactly, but it's probably about 400 kilometers of offset. So it's hitting southern Idaho or maybe northernmost Nevada, and then has moved up to its current position.
Well, speaking of that, Brian Mahoney was very specific, saying that intermontane and that insular were joined at the hip. They're moving south together. They're moving north together. It's maybe a question more for Bernie than for you, but are you generally viewing that the way that Mahoney is?
No. And the question is, how much do you believe Turn Creek? So there's all this other data from the rest of the Intermontane that is younger than that says it has moved as much north. So like this is Ochoco Basin and so forth. That's younger than the 105 Silverquick, and that's all moved the same amount north. So you either have to throw out the Churn Creek stuff and make everything else make sense, or you basically take all the other stuff and say something's up with Churn Creek. And to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with the paleomag at Churn Creek. I think that paleomagnetic data is good. The problem is it's based on a geological model of flatline coherent stratigraphy, and I think that's wrong. Am I sure of that? No, but that's my hypothesis for that, right? And that is a testable hypothesis. And I have to say, Nick, your show is going to do one bad thing. I'm going to have to go to Churn Creek. I've been avoiding it for 15 years, but I don't think there's any more choice. I think I need to just go figure out what's going on at Churn Creek, right?
Well, what would you do there?
It's really whether there's faults in that section. Is it really a coherent section, which again, stratigraphers would be biased towards, or is there enough possibility to put thrust faults or even strike slip faults in there? And there's other techniques you can use to basically say, is this block, like for instance, are they slightly different in terms of rotation from each other or things like that? You're looking for faults. Is it permissible to put faults? And I have to tell you, Southern British Columbia is full of faults. You want faults, that's a good place to go.
Am I remembering correctly that Churn Creek is a proposed sutural zone between intermontane and insular, or not? Not everybody sees it that way.
Not everybody sees it that way. The problem is that there is a paleomagnetic volcanic sequence that looks everything like the intermontane. And then there's a paleomagnetic sedimentary source that looks everything like the insular. And they're interpreted to be conformably on top of each other. And if you believe that, and if that's right, then it makes sense to have this ribbon continent movement, right? But if you do that, then you really have to get into this world of like this part of the intermontane terrain is moving different from that part of the intermontane.
Wow.
terrain.
Okay. Well, let's reel it back to stuff that you have intimate knowledge of. So am I visualizing 400 kilometers of strike slip motion if I push you, Western Idaho shear zone and that Northwest Nevada shear zone as well, 400?
And the Sierra Nevada.
And the Sierra Nevada, and they all shut off at 85.
Yes.
So they're carbon copies of each other, more or less. Plutons, strike slip, and you're visualizing eastward subduction to create those plutons, or am I going too far now?
Yes, that's right. So, but remember that once you stop it, the slab, right? Once you've hit something, that slab just keeps going. So you've got some amount of additional subduction to create some more plutons. And so, and also that area has a lot of heat already, and it's got a lot of water already. So it would continue to produce plutons.
Okay. One more, and then we're going to you, viewers. I'm sorry. One more. What's up with the Klamath Mountains? I can't decide. Is that intermontane? Is it insular? Is there pieces of both? Like just as a little, I think we're heading there eventually this winter, but do the Klamath mean anything to you? Are they important?
Yeah, so you nailed it. The Klamaths are one interesting bit of rock. And I think again, I know why, and it goes back to the jagged edge.
Wow.
If you take the strike slip motion in the Sierra Nevada and you pull it south, the Klamath sit on the edge of basically a transform, a Precambrian transform. So they're just sitting right there. They get whapped by everything that goes by as long as things keep going south. So pre-100.
Pre-100.
Pre-100. So anything going south is going to hit the Klamath. And so like there's weird stuff like the Wairika terrain that has the trial zircons from Baltica. I mean, it's just like, what in the world is going on?
Wow.
But there is no intermontane south of the Klamaths. So the Blue Mountains do not look like the Klamaths. Completely different history. And so there really is that difference in terms of what gets around the Klamaths is a different story from what gets stuck in that sort of Idaho recess of the continent. But it says if that's your position on sort of the edge of North America where it's sticking out a little bit, you're going to get hit by everything, which is probably what happened with the Klamaths.
Wow. I love it. Okay, viewers. Basil, you got a few more minutes. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
winter break. You should be so home sitting by the fire, but you trudge. Is it snowing there right now in Wisconsin?
It wasn't when I came in.
Okay.
Wisconsin winters have really become kind of wimpy, I have to tell you, Nick. This is not really serious Wisconsin winter.
Not what I remember. Okay.
No.
Well, I appreciate you coming into the office anyway. Uppercase viewers, happy to pass along some of your questions to our expert. Okay. Phil doesn't screw around here, Basil. Phil says, why does the Columbia embayment come and go in your diagrams?
I think the Columbia embayment is formed when the terrains finally move up and out of the way. And so there is no lithosphere there because these terrains have moved north and it has just leaves a hole. And what's interesting about that is, and I should say first, that was an early paper by Brian Wernicke had suggested this as well, that what that predicts is a little bit is going to get left in Northwest Nevada. And that's exactly right. There's a little bit of Quinellia, which is intermontane left. And then there's the smattering along the Western Idaho shear zone. But there's basically nothing between there. So it's basically, I think it's just the northward pulling out. So the Columbia embayment does not exist until the intermontane terrain moves north.
Well, that's a shock to me. I thought it was only an insular story, but you have intermontane also heading north and leaving this hole.
Oh yeah, I mean, the intermontane is a sneaky little devil. So there's the ribbon continent versus the hit and run is really
Yeah.
how much do you move the insular before it picks up the intermontane and they both move, versus the ribbon continent is everything's moving all at once. And it's fine. It's an interesting question. We don't know, but and this is a problem. There's really good paleomagnetic data on the Carmex group, which is now up in Yukon. And it's moved 1,700 plus or minus kilometers since 70 million years. That's really late. The only fault that can do it is the Tintina. So, in my opinion, the Tintina is the big player for the moving the intermontane. And once the insular and intermontane are together, then basically you're piggybacking. So you don't need to have such a huge insular intermontane fault, because if you move the intermontane north, it's taking the insular with it.
So does that mean the Columbia embayment starts to form younger than 70 because the Tintina only starts after that?
Well, it's not the Tintina that starts, it's the Carmex group has to start moving.
Oh,
right.
God,
And no, you got it. I mean, it's basically that most of the intermontane seems like if you're going to take the Carmex and put it with the other intermontane groups, then all of that has to start moving at 70, and the Carmex is the constraint on it.
God, this is you're setting up the entire month, not just the next show. Look at you. Thank you. Toughen Up Fluffy asks, could the Farallon plate have foundered due to an onboard terrain collision?
Yes. So it was Eldridge Morris who said, when you look at seismic tomography, the slabs don't have names, right? Which is to say, if you see these dangling little bits in the mantle, you don't know what they were part of, right? So it depends on what model you're going to use for the Farallon. To me, Karin Siglock and Mitch Maholnick's data suggest that the Farallon does not contact North America until about 60 million years. Whereas many other geologists are happy having a continuous Farallon subduction starting at about 200 million years ago, maybe make it 170, because that's when the blue schists more or less are starting to form in the Franciscan complex, and happy to go the whole way. But the blue schists end at about 90 million years in California. So it's actually not so clear after that. So what Karin's data show really well is there's a bunch of slabs. And the one that's furthest east cannot be the Farallon. So to get to the question, it's not the Farallon foundering or sink. So the Farallon can either just subduct as two things run into each other, or we have this model that basically you could have east subduction under North America and west subduction under the insular. That gets you the west subduction that the slab wall that Karin is talking about could work. And it also is a really good way of colliding two things together. And we think that happened in the Jurassic. People have models of this doubly dipping subduction zone in the Jurassic. And my suspicion is that that's what's happening in the Cretaceous as well. It would explain Karin's data, tomographic data, but also explain at the same time that there's eastward subduction underneath California to get you the Franciscan complex, the blue schists, which we think are associated with subduction.
These are going to be themes we're going to be talking about the entire month, and you're just setting everything out on a silver platter for us. So thank you, David Newton. Sinistral transpression followed by dextral transpression followed by transtension? Question mark. Is that the chronology?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there is, I'm not sure the sinistral, how much transpression compression there is in there. I think there might not be a whole lot. I think it might be mostly coastward translation, more San Andreas-like than that. But yes, that happens till about 100, 105, 100, depends. Then I think it is dextral transpression until about 55. And then we're back to the Eocene series that Nick did. And it's dextral transtension starting at about 55 as things pull out. And we get the core complexes in the northern part of the U.S., but also in the Canadian Rockies.
You know, I stumbled on a Tanya Atwater lecture that she gave online just a few months ago, and she was reminding me of this beautiful symmetry of these butterfly wings in the Pacific and these magnetic anomalies and matching patterns and everything like the Atlantic, and half the wing is gone essentially because of the stuff we're talking about, these things going down the hole. But I'm looking at those reconstructions of Tanya Atwater from 55 years ago, and does it bother you that those reconstructions show a very simple ocean floor in the Pacific Basin? Like you're saying everything's being dragged south and then being headed north to another trench in the Arctic, but that's possible when you still have this rather beautiful symmetry?
Yeah, so absolutely. Because they're mid-ocean spreading centers, the spreading centers can move in space, right, as they open. So, but what has happened in the last 50 years is we know these systems aren't really all that simple, right? So, for instance, the Shatsky Rise, right, there's this big bit on Pacific, and there must have been a big bit on the Farallon. That's just not true. So the most recent models are that it moves, but then the basically the ridge keeps jumping towards the Farallon plate, which puts all of the Shatsky Rise on the Pacific and none on the Farallon, right? Again, that's something most Cordilleran geologists don't follow.
Right.
The other thing is there's also big chunks, these huge things like the Antang Java Plateau, these thick plateaus that are all part of the Pacific plate, but they didn't start on the Pacific plate. They started on another plate, and that basically they've jumped when mid-ocean ridges stop into other plates. So in the last 50 years, we've learned that these plates are actually a little bit more complicated about how they work, which is awesome, right? It's like things are more complicated and they're more three-dimensional than you expect. And that's basically the hit and run model too. It's more complicated and it's more three-dimensional.
Well, I've stayed away from ocean plates because it feels like a whole nother frontier and another data set that I think I'm afraid of. And you don't mention the Kula plate much in your new paper, I don't think. Are you still thinking Kula plate, or is there a separate micro plate that is tied to Baja BC somehow that's totally gone? Or is that the same thing, Kula and micro plate that Merle Beck was talking about so long ago?
I think the Kula plate probably is still, I mean, I have not read anything that suggests that the Kula plate would not be there. But they've never known where to put the Kula Farallon junction against North America, right? Is it in Mexico? Is it really right at the tail of the whale and basically moving things up? Paul Umhofer and other people have talked about that. I think that's probably right. And I think it starts at about 85. So just to add, you can add that to your 85 list, right? And so why it breaks, it could be because of what's going on in North America. It could be big Pacific plate interactions. But the key is that we've assumed for so long that it's simply the Farallon going down the tubes after time. And that's almost certainly wrong, right? You just have to accept that. The data, the seismic topography data is just really good. And there's just lots of slabs down there. And they're not doing the same thing. So you cannot have, in the Western United States, a single slab. It just does not work.
Well, you didn't feel like that hit and run paper got traction 25, almost 30 years ago. I hope you get more traction this time around with all these new data sets and everything else. But you feel like for the rest of your career, you're still going to be having people talking about flat slab directly to you?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I mean, this is one of these things. It almost certainly will not catch on, right? The Maxon and Tikoff paper was just the foot in the door that says maybe we don't have this right, and I just have to accept that when you put in an idea and it's sufficiently different, that it's unlikely that people will accept it, right? Because they still can get their data and fit it into the pre-existing model. And why would you want to, risk rejection of a scientific paper for doing that? So the point of the paper is just to say, look, other people have said this. Maybe they're even reasonable people, and maybe we have to explore this as a possibility. It's the point of alternative hypotheses, and we make a big deal about multiple working hypotheses. So it's good to have out there as a data just for other people to say, maybe it is. Because there are some things that are really problematic with the shallow slab. The paleomagnetic data, absolutely. But I think just the geologic data is really problematic. Why is there so much strike slip motion?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you don't have to convince me. I'm totally in. A few more, if you got 5 more minutes, Basil, maybe 10 more. There's some more good questions here. Hans asks, are there any parts of the North American craton that was moved north by the insular or the intermontane?
So that's a great question. Have you slivered off a little bit of North America into the mix? So from my opinion, no. But if you take Bob Hildebrand's suggestion, he would move the strike slip faults far into the continent. I don't see evidence for that, which is not to say it didn't happen, but I just don't see the evidence for it. What I know is that exactly what Hans proposed did happen in the Permian and Triassic. That California used to stick out even further into the Pacific, and you've taken that outwardmost block and moved it south. And it's called the Caborca block. It's now in Mexico, but it's clearly North America, and it almost certainly is started at California latitudes. So, I mean, it's basically the whole Cordillera, the whole time is moving obliquely, right? And so it's not a surprise that it's doing it in the Cretaceous when the plate motions are like 3 times what they are today.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, sort of the litmus test to any model is if you make a cross section, does it have strike slip faults in it? Because if it's only a 2-dimensional model, it's almost certainly wrong, right? And I think that's why people like the flat slab, right? You can do it all in 2 dimensions. It used to be like this, goes like this, goes like that. But it's just like, now there's lots of stuff going in and out of the paper. The margins are irregular. In North America, the margins and the terrains were irregular. It's a complicated system.
Oh, this is a blast. 3 more and we're done. Sky Cooley asks, how far west are rocks of the Palouse promontory found?
That is a great question. Probably Priest River Dome, or if you looked at a geologic map, as far west as you get belt supergroup stuff. So somewhere around Priest River.
Mount Sylvania asked, at Orofino, Idaho, is the Dvorak Dam, and there's lots of crumpled rock there. Is that part of the whiz?
Yes. So what happened, this is really interesting. So I thought the whiz was just going to basically go straight north. It didn't happen at all. What happens is it goes straight north in McCall, and then all the fabrics basically bend around. And so Orofino is right in that bend. But you can literally follow the fabric all the way around. So what that meant, and it took years to get this through my thick head, is this is all North America. North America does not want to deform, and it pushes all the deformation onto its edge rather than deforming the interior of North America. It's a backstop, if you will, towards the terrain motion. And crazy stuff happens right there. Just like crazy stuff is currently happening in the armpit of Alaska, which is where Aaron Donahue and Mike Eddy are studying things, right? All that fast uplift is actually a pretty good analogy for what's happening in Idaho, or I would say also for what's happening in places like the Little Maria Belt in Southern California. That's just sticking out a little too far for things that are pushing north.
Wow. All right, last one. David, so the insular must have slipped around the Klamaths rather than hit them?
Yes, it did. And so I will sort of give you a little bit of a coming up attractions here. So Rich Gaffney is going to be talking with Erica, and they're going to be talking about a little bit of, I think, paint that's left on the bumper of that motion. It's called the Gold Beach terrain, and there's pretty good evidence that it cannot possibly, it's the westernmost part of the Klamaths, and it cannot possibly have been there in the Cretaceous. It makes no sense. It had to have moved from the south and significantly. Bernie Hausen did the paleomagnetic data on it, and the paleomag suggests about 1,500 kilometers of displacement. So it's a little bit of the paint on the bumper. If you want to see the Baja BC fault, go to the east end of the Klamaths, go to the west end of the Klamaths, the east end of the Gold Beach terrain, go find all the poison oak that's around there, and that's basically about half of the fault.
Really?
Yeah, it's got to be. Right, it's not from there. So if there's poison oak, Nick, I'm telling you, it's serious. But right, it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. And we know this. There's little bits and pieces along like the San Andreas system that also, like the Wallala terrain, just get stuck, and they're just little bits that are outboard of the fault. But again, like the San Andreas, there's some idea in the literature of a proto San Andreas fault. You need to have something, there has to be right lateral motion of some sort to make sense of the Eocene patterns in California. So people have talked about a proto San Andreas fault. That's almost certainly insular motion related.
Well, I want to thank you again. I'm always thanking you, but it's for good reason. You're always donating your time to come with us here. You've organized the Penrose thing happening in August. You're going to be at the Reno thing in May. You continue with this, and I'm hoping that our group can continue to follow. I guess we'll just continue to try to absorb the detail in that paper as we continue. But each time we visit with you, it feels like I, at least, are making a huge leap forward. And the latest is this Klamath stuff. That's a highlight for me in real time. But of course, I'll rewatch this and I'll see a bunch more things you dropped in there that need more brain power. So that's a long-winded way to say thank you for your time. And I'm hoping to visit with you again down the road, Basil.
Absolutely my pleasure, Nick.
Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Sounds great.
Whoo! He's so good, and he just magically lowered my blood pressure once I figured out my YouTube audio problem, and I just was able to just get right back in. And I really hope that you were able to stick with us to this point and get through those audio troubles that may still exist for all I know. In fact, can I ask you 5x5? Are we 5x5 before I try just a couple more things with the laptop, just to see? I just thoroughly enjoy these sessions, and the fact that you're there and learning right along with the rest of us is wonderful. I see all the 5x5s, terrific. Let's go over and just put a couple of final touches on this, if possible. So let me slow myself down. Especially for those that feel like things got a little too nutso for you. I understand. And you can think of nutso from all sorts of angles, I suppose. But this is really 1978. This is a 50-year-old idea now. And I didn't hammer it again today with Basil because you've heard it more than once from him if you've been a regular of this series. there's just less and less evidence, not only paleomagnetically, but rock evidence, that this shallow slab or this flat slab is a driver for much of the Rocky Mountains. And that was not our discussion topic today, but I'm reminding you that that's Basil's main contribution here, is to get away from that concept of the Rocky Mountains being built by an always Andean margin and a gently and gradually and consistently eastward subducting Farallon plate for 200 frickin' million years. Okay, I made a little bit of progress, I think, contemplating the intermontane superterrane. I still have a ways to go, and I will continue to bring up, maybe that's one goal I have by mid-February. Can I come to terms a little bit more directly with the history of this intermontane superterrane? And it might be one of those that I get a wildly different answer from every group that I visit with, or every author that I visit with. But since the intermontane superterrane is not far from my house, I would like to know more about it. I didn't quite get there with Basil, but his idea, and you'll see it in the paper, the catch and release concept that I love, I love the moniker, is rotating this Palouse promontory away on sinistral or left lateral motion on the Lewis and Clark line, which is not here, but that's going to come up later this month. And we can eventually get this Blue Mountains block to run north, I guess, but I'm still struggling with that. I think I did catch that there's 400 kilometers of lateral offset on the western Idaho shear zone. So this, which is now the Blue Mountains, had to have been 400 kilometers south. I hadn't really thought that through. It's not that hard a concept. Didn't really have that before today. Later this month, we're going to get all sorts of speculation and data supporting speculation. In other words, these other tectonic models. Folks that love eastward, folks that love westward, and Basil proposing both. We remove an ocean basin between the insular superterrane and old North America, and here's the intermontane apparently added, and get rid of that ocean floor by subducting on both sides. The consistency, another highlight for me, the consistency of look and geology of strike slip motion with major plutons as well in the western Idaho shear zone, the western or the northwestern Nevada shear zone, the Sierra Nevada shear zone. Basil did his field work for his PhD down here. He spent 25 years here. Apparently he's been doing some work in here. So he's the expert on this shear zone and how consistent it is. That's another hallmark to me. But yes, one of you guys asked about the Columbia embayment. I think I learned a little bit more about that, involving the intermontane motion, which maybe shouldn't be a surprise to me, but it is. And then the poison oak, did he say? The poison oak scene, we're going to have a show in early February devoted to that. Well, are we brave enough? I'm not going to take the time to remove myself from the corner here, but this is insular. This is intermontane. Basil is cramming all sorts of hit and run detail. Notice this is a schematic for the hit phase. British Columbia, Idaho, California, Southern California, Baja, Mexico, Southern Mexico. And it takes a while to try to understand what he's up to here, but here's the Palouse promontory, here's the Southern California inward bend. And he's a synthesizer. He's taking all this data from places going from the margin of North America all the way back into the Central Rockies and trying to find data that supports this model. Or in other words, looking at all this data and realizing there's a regional story. Here's the black line showing the jagged little pill, the jagged edge of the western margin of Precambrian North America. Here's the California Triad. Here's uplifts inland. I mean, there's a lot to digest. You could just, I think I spent, I don't know how long. I spent a lot of time really trying to think about these diagrams. And then here's the run. As our whale is heading north, at least for a time, the Intermontane is heading north at the same time. Blue Mountains, California Triad, Alocitos, block uplifts inland. Man. And if that's not enough, here's another way to try to tell. These are all coming from the new paper. Here's another way to try to tell the same story. Now by time, here's the main hit with the insular superterranean 100 million years ago. Here's 85, the kickstarting of the Baja BC movement and the shutdown of those magmatic systems in those shear zones. And then again, our jagged coastline. A quick look at Saturday morning show with Bernie Hausen. Bernie helping us. You know what? This is more of a look to a week from today. So as I mentioned, we have Bernie Hausen twice. And it's a week from today that he's going to comment specifically on this robust paleomagnetic data from the hit and run paper. So this is a sneak peek for a week from today. I guess that's session O with Bernie Hausen. But that's a week from today. And this coming Saturday morning, Bernie Hausen, who was handpicked by Merle Beck to be a colleague studying paleomagnetism at Western Washington University, Bernie's going to give us a session on Saturday morning looking at the basics of paleomagnetism. And it will be a basic session, but it's probably, I'm talking about myself, it's probably going to feel like a lot. I've been trying to teach myself some paleomag over the break. I don't know if it's been going very well, but I will try to do a few things on the chalkboard on Saturday morning with some very basic paleomagnetic messages that I teach in 101. And then I might, I don't know, I'm not sure what I'm going to do on Saturday, but there's going to be a lot of Bernie Hausen on Saturday morning, and we're going to remove ourselves from the terrain discussion generally, and we're going to be very careful about why should we care about this paleomagnetic data set? How real is it? Why isn't everybody looking at it? And after 50 years of that work, there really hasn't been a change in viewing the validity of that paleomag data. 50 years of work, doing the work. Somebody comes by 10, 15 years later, recalibrates, redoes the work. Bernie's recalculated stuff that Merle did. It's more than just the Western Washington group. As far as I can tell right now, they continue to all agree that this is the most obvious data set there is. And why aren't these field geologists listening to us? A quick look at the schedule. The next time I see you will be Saturday morning, January 7th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, Bernie Hausen, Part 1. And the following Wednesday, January 11th, Bernie Hausen, Part 2, 2 o'clock Pacific time. Very much looking forward to those two shows with Bernie. And I shared this at the beginning of the program, but here we go again. We have the entire month of January laid out. And after our two Bernie shows, we will have 2 more paleomagnetic shows with paleomagneticism expert Jane Wynn on Saturday, January 14th, Randy Inkin, Paleomag, January 18th. And then we go to the slabs that are in the lower mantle. Karin Siglock with Mitch Mahalanek, Stephen Johnston, Bob Hildebrand twice to wrap things up with those models that I introduced at the beginning. So, do you totally understand the hit and run model? I don't think I do either. I will continue to read that paper, and we will continue to look at the data that's in that paper next Wednesday. But by the end of January, we will have been visiting with folks who support 2 other tectonic models, and maybe you enjoyed Basil's commentary on the role of models and data sets and everything else. A toast to you. This is water, but I'm going to go home and have a couple of beers, I think. Here's to you and your health. Thank you for joining us today. Here's to Basil Tikoff, once again, University of Wisconsin, Structure and Tectonics Professor, University of Wisconsin. Here's to you, Basil. Thank you. Here's to the health of your friends and your family, everyone in your community, here in the new year of 2023. I hope you got through the holiday time refreshed, rejuvenated, and reconnected to people that you love. And a special thank you to those of you, I can't even tell how many there are because of all the weirdness today, but a special thank to those that are watching live here with us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be with us live. It really adds to these sessions. Thank you. I did notice that right before Christmas, the view numbers for our shows were starting to go down a little bit. And I'm like, oh boy, I guess it's too challenging now, or it doesn't seem that exciting, or whatever. And I kind of mentally just said, oh, well, you know, I'm still enjoying these shows, but I guess it's not for everybody. Well, you know what I noticed just the other day when I looked at the view numbers again? All those view numbers are back up to 10,000 for each show. So that means that a bunch of you were interested, but we're busy with the holidays and everything else. And we took a 2-week break, but I mean, all those shows that were coming fast and furious in mid-December. So I want to thank those of you who were watching the replays to do your homework and get caught up and get back up to speed so that you could join us live or start the new year kind of up to date with what's going on. That was just really nice to see those numbers back up. So I guess people aren't quitting on the series. It's just a matter of finding the time to sit down and listen to these things and watch these things. Okay, that's enough for today. Thank you, dear viewers. I love you, and we will see you after I find my mouse. We'll see you Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. Goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA.